Siad Eva Carja is Mr. Tierna McLaren, is Mr. Nufaka Forber Gaeliga and Shaw Carja Cho in Ardwaka. My name is Kieran Smith and I am the Irish Language Development Officer here in Armagh. We should go ahead and rang I done a couple of moments I'll produce a couple of fish in the Hashman Dave. We'll be going to the classes now shortly, but before that we have a few films to show you. And Kate Kion, na Kion Fui na Hashna Tauguin and Shaw in Ianakwaha. The first one is about the facilities and the building that we have here now in Ianakwaha available to us. And Darnakion na Kainch Fui Fianna Vreed August Fianna IMBOLG. The second one is about St. Bridget's Day and Fianna IMBOLG, which is what we're obviously celebrating at the moment. August and Triakion na Kainch Ain't Simul o James McKee o Othra Archaeology. Fianna Ruddy a V and Seo and Shaw in Ianakwaha. Ermagov.
Ardwatha, Loniocht Arsa, Tawachtach agus Stairún, a bhí go mór chun tosaí is saoil na hÉireann le 3 mhíle bliana nuas. Tosaíonn ar scéal in Abhainn Watha, ceann de na siúhanna is táhachtaí in dhearann. Áit chruinnithe, áit teacht le chéile, siú tradala, idithis, creidimh agus fillitiachta. Relic na hard réiche, áit ar scríbú leor Ardwatha, áit léan, scéalaíachta, is óránaíachta, siú macnamh, aimsithe agus spiridalta, siú teanga. Inniu tá ar geol, ar tradiisiún, ar sport agus ar deanga faoi bhleá. Tá siad beo bathaíoch. Áit fiberí, ilí, scolarí is ceird, bé an áit seo ag cothú, ag neartú agus ag treisiú. Tá aiseanna ar leith ar fáil in Ianachwaha. Scoith na spásan na léirithe, seomraí seminar, seomraí main cumarsaide, ifigí, dascan na sealaíachta, seomraí ranga, siopa brontanas agus cafe, levan jean, seomraí cruinnithe don phobal, ólas de thorasóirí is do chuirteoirí, tuiris éireachta faoi stiúr, agus spás le fintar hóisialta a chothú. Bílíonn agus buala uair don Gaeilge a chothú agin in Ardwatha.
Agus Anisha Kharja Minahi Raymond O'Kieran Gockrud Fui IMBOLG. Now everybody, Raymond O'Kieran will give an overview of IMBOLG.
Tamajan Shaw chruch fáthirte, tá sé anspéisialta mar áit mar is an seo I Gundí Louis a tháinig níomh bríd ar an taal. Bhí an wathair ag siúil isteach sa teach, mar bhíos aici gur an leanú ag teacht, agus nar tháinig an leanú ar an taal agus níomh bríd leabhailí isteach ag an teach agus leabhailí amuigh ar thárseach a taí, agus sin mar atá níomh bríd. Díreach ar thárseach na Christiachtaí agus an sean chreidú. Ghlach níomh bríd ainm ban dé leis an ainm céine agus an rud is táhachtaí faoin bhaindí sin na patrúntachtaí a bhí aici na filiocht, léas agus gabhadóireach nó obair vital agus sin na patrúntachtaí a ghlach níomh bríde. Agus tá sé irónach mar sin go bhfuil an chiimhne ar an bhaindí ciníthe beo is scéaltaithe a bhaineann leis an níú I héan. Agus bhí níomh bríd a bhhad chun tosaí. Bhainaí si an chéad bhainisteoir in dhearann agus chomáile sin thug si an ard don bhacht. Bhí si a gcónaí ag tabhairt muoin an athair thuig na créatarí bachta agus sílam de mé níú bríd an seo inniu hartar bhíle go lei blian in éadaí hatar an taal, sílam go mé si ag cidú aitirbe a míon daoine bachton. Titin féle níomh bríd an chéad lá de bhí fiabhra, agus is onan an chéad lá de bhí fiabhra agus féle IMBOLG, nuair a chuireann muid fáilte ribh an Dhearach, nuair a thosaíonn an nádar ag muscail suas am tarsacúil a ríist, nuair a bhíonn an sú a géirí sna crin, agus sin an fá a bhfuil an dáta sin réanaithe do níomh bríd mar tá sí buinteach le mrá, le torthúlacht, agus cílíonn an tearma IMBOLG istí sa bholg, agus chomáile sin tá sé luaite le baine, ní bhíú na daoine abalta rachtail ag an siopa ar waithe le baine, bhí siad ag brath na chéirí agus na ba a bheith torach, agus bhíú bó a gcónaí le níomh bríd, bóháin le clúsa dearaga agus í ag gulthart. Córtha a bhain atá ceangail se le níomh bríd, níos mó na ruderbí eile na chrosóg bhríde. Agus téann an chros siar ag aimseir na geilteach, agus is crosóg a bhaineann leis an ghrian seachas leis an chríostaíocht. I tradiisiún is sogíine an seo in dhéarann. Tá cuachtaí ag an chros. Cineann sé an teach samhailte ó hinne, nó cineann sé mí áh ar shiúil fa hinne bliana, agus cineann sé na hanmhíthe samhailte sa mhaithach. Níl aontas ar bí go bhfuil níomh bríd go mór i meon na tíre seo, mar tá buinteachí leis an éirimiúireacht, leis na hanmhíthe. Nuair a tháinig an chríostaíocht ag an tír seo in san 15ú haois le níomh pádraig, sílam go raibh asnú éigean i meon na naoine faoin reiligiún uair seo, reiligiún firinnscinach, agus bhí na bandaithe go mór contasaí scéaltaí ar sean, agus sin an fá a bhfuil uirm speisialta ag muire, maithar Chríost, agus ar nua ag bríd, agus tugtar bríd eile ar níomh bríd, nó muire na ngéal. Tá suamhneas iontach an seo, agus éon duine a bhfuil búrú inseanna orthú, nó éon duine atá ag mothú tin. Is córdóibh teacht an seo ag condaí luaí, ag an áit ar rugadh níomh bríd, agus cid den suamhneas a thu isteach.
We'll hear a talk from James McKee from Optra Archaeology about the fascinating artefacts discovered in Ianagwaha Foundations. Eshigi and Neshakarja le James McKee.
Judith. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone at Ianagwaha for inviting me to give this presentation for the IMBOLG Festival. Gormag. In the video, I'll be talking about the history of Armagh and the results of archaeological monitoring I carried out at the Ianagwaha development site in Armagh in 2018. It is often a planning requirement that an archaeologist is present on development sites during groundworks, in case any archaeological finds or features are found. This is now the case for most building developments in Armagh due to the historical importance of the city. Armagh has been described as one big archaeological site and has also been called the oldest city in Ireland owing to its ancient origins. The historical core of Armagh is the Drumlin Hill, crowned by the medieval St Patrick's Church of Ireland Cathedral. The Enoch site is located at the bottom of the hill, about 300 metres north of the cathedral at the Shambles roundabout. It was built on the site of a demolished fire station at the junction of Upper English Street, Dawson Street and the Cathedral Road. Famed as the city of saints and scholars, Armagh has a long and celebrated history. While it became the Christian capital of Ireland, its origins may go back to prehistoric times. The name Armagh is derived from the Irish Ardwaha, meaning the height of Maha. Maha being a pagan goddess and queen of Irish mythology, associated with war, horses and sovereignty. She also gave her name to Awan Maha, or Navan Fort, the ancient capital of Ulster, situated on a hill just 3 kilometres west of Armagh. Awan Maha is recorded as Regia, meaning royal place, on Ptolemy's 2nd century map, showing the importance of the site and area in prehistory. A group of carved stone figures preserved in the cathedral have been dated to about the 2nd century BC and may hint at the existence of a pagan sanctuary there. The most famous one is the Tandragee idol, which may be a representation of Nuada of the Silver Arm, or possibly Conall Cernach, a hero of the Ulster cycle of tales. Dara, the pagan chieftain of Armagh at the time of St Patrick, has similarities with the Irish god, the Dagda. It has also been suggested the circular street pattern of Armagh reflects the earthworks of a prehistoric hill fort or ritual site, although this has not yet been proven. The presence of Awan Maha no doubt drew St Patrick to the area, who according to the Annals of Ulster founded Armagh in 445 AD. A 7th century history of the saint's life, preserved in the Book of Armagh, describes how Patrick asked the chieftain Dara for the hilltop site of Drumsalia, meaning the Ridge of Willows, on which to build a church. This is the hill on which the Church of Ireland Cathedral now stands. Dara refused and instead gave him a plot where he built his first church in Armagh, known as Temple na Ferda, roughly where St Patrick's Fold on Scotch Street now stands. It happened that Dara's horses died after grazing on the church land, and so he ordered his men to kill Patrick. However, Dara is struck down with illness, and his men instead beg Patrick to heal him. Patrick's holy water revives both Dara and his horses, and Patrick is rewarded with a great cauldron on the hill of Drumsalia, where he built his Dalig Mor, meaning the great church. It was around this church that Armagh developed. From the 7th century on, references to Armagh in the manuscripts occur frequently, due to the fact that it became the seat of Patrick's successors and known in Ireland and Europe as a centre of religion and learning. In 685, Alfred, Prince of the Northumbrian Saxons, wrote that, "I found in Armagh the splendid meekness, wisdom, circumspection, fasting and obedience to the Son of God, noble, prosperous sages." By the 8th century, Armagh's claim to ecclesiastical primacy was being accepted, and in 807 the Book of Armagh claimed it to be the See of Patrick and Ireland's primatial church. The relics of Patrick, including the Bacalisa, crozier or staff of Jesus, St Patrick's Bell, and the Book of Armagh, were used to enhance the city's ecclesiastical status. During this time, a monastery developed on top of the hill around Patrick's great church within inner and outer circular enclosures known as the Rath. Other buildings recorded include the Savile, Church of the Elections, an abbot's house, a library, a scriptorium, at least one round tower, a kitchen and dwellings. The Rath enclosures were defined by a circular ditch with an entrance in the east, where one of a number of high crosses stood. The line of the inner enclosure is believed to be marked by the wall around the cathedral precinct, and an outer enclosure preserved in the circular pattern of Abbey Street, Calvin Street and Castle Street. A third outer enclosure towards the bottom of the hill may be preserved in the circular street pattern of Ogle Street, Thomas Street, Market Street and Upper English Street. Part of the Rath ditch was found in 1968 on the hill slope between Castle Street and the cathedral graveyard wall. Archaeologists uncovered a large defensive ditch, 16 foot wide and 10 foot deep, in the fill of which they discovered metalworking, glass and amber artefacts, and animal bones dating to the 8th and 9th centuries. This shows that as well as being a centre for religion and learning, Armagh was also a centre of trade, settlement and craft. Outside the Rath, the settlement was divided into thirds, known as Tryon Masson, roughly Scotch Street, Tryon Moor, the Irish Street area, and Tryon Saxon, around English Street. It is not known how or if the Tryon boundaries were defined, or how widely occupation was spread across the slopes of the hill. It is also unknown if the Tryons were completely built over with ecclesiastical buildings and the dwellings of monks, nuns, workers and traders. It is also recorded that 2 convents of nuns were established at Temple Bridget and Temple Neferta. It was said that the remains of St. Patrick's sister Lupita was found buried upright in Scotch Street in the 17th century. A Culdee Priory stood in the area of Castle Street and St. Columba's Church at the bottom of Abbey Street. Unfortunately, the wealth of Armagh attracted the Vikings, who first raided the monastic city in 831. In 839, the Viking leader Thorgest attacked 3 times in 1 month and eventually drove out the abbot and occupied Armagh for 4 years. The period of Viking attacks lasted from 831 until 1013, during which time they plundered Armagh on 10 occasions and joined forces with the Irish in 2 further attacks. A Viking treasure hoard found in the River Blackwater is believed to have been plundered from Armagh and shows the wealth of the city at the time. The hoard includes gold, silver, bronze and lead objects. In 1004, the primacy of Armagh was formally recognised by the High King Brian Boru, who left 20 ounces of gold on the altar of the cathedral with instructions that upon his death he should be buried there. After his death in the Battle of Clontarf in 1014, in which he defeated a Viking army, his body was taken to Armagh and buried in the north side of the cathedral. Armagh continued to develop after the Viking era. A large abbey of Augustinian canons, dedicated to Saints Peter and Paul, was founded in 1126 in the Abbey Street area. Armagh's prenatial status was recognised by Rome, and it was decreed that all masters of studies in any Irish monastic school had to be educated in Armagh. Armagh-born St Malachy became Archbishop in 1129 and instigated a number of important reforms to the Irish Church. The years from 1184 to 1217 saw 9 more attacks on Armagh, some by the Normans and sometimes by the Irish. Archbishop O'Scannell founded the Franciscan Friary in 1263 and also commenced work in 1266 on the present cathedral. War returned to Armagh in 1396 when it was raided by a combined force of Irish and Anglo-Normans. During the 16th century wars, the English used Armagh as a forward military base, turning the cathedral into a fortress and building ramparts around it. In 1566, Shane O'Neill burnt the roof off the cathedral and demolished part of the walls to deny its use to the English forces. Armagh was pillaged twice in 1568 by Turlough, Linne O'Neill and Con O'Donnell. In 1575, Lord Deputy Sidney found the cathedral, quote, all down and the town miserable. In 1586, English military commander Sir Henry Bagnall described it as, quote, a small village, having the church and other friaries there, for the most part broken and defaced. During the 9 Years' War in 1595, Hugh O'Neill burnt Armagh, but spared the cathedral. O'Neill again attacked Armagh in 1596, and after defeat at the Battle of the Yellow Ford in 1598, the English garrison surrendered. In 1601, the English re-garrisoned the settlement and had a map drawn of the battered remains of the war-torn city. This map is very useful in that it shows many of the buildings recorded in the manuscripts, including, according to one interpretation, the cathedral on top of the hill marked 1, the temple Neferta Church and Nunnery marked 2, the Eastern High Cross, roughly where the modern Market Street Cross stands today, at 3, St. Peter and Paul's Abbey, 4, the Culdee Priory, 5, the Abbot's House, 6, and Awan Maha or Navan Fort at 7. During the plantation in the early 17th century, Armagh, as church land, passed to the Church of Ireland archbishops, who attempted redevelopment. However, war intervened again in Armagh's history, and in 1641 it was surrendered to Sir Phelim O'Neill. In 1642 it was recorded that, quote, Armagh was burned, with its cathedral, close, bells, organs and glass windows, and the whole town, even to the limestone houses. In the early 18th century, Armagh steadily recovered and developed into a thriving market town. The restoration of Armagh was undertaken by Archbishop Robinson, whose programme of civic and ecclesiastical reconstruction involved the building of the Archbishop's Palace, Chapel and Domain, the Royal School, the Public Library, the Infirmary and the Observatory. Armagh continued to grow in the 19th century as a prosperous linen and market town, with fine architecture built across the famed Seven Hills. In 1834, the medieval cathedral was restored, and in 1840, work started on the St. Patrick's Catholic Cathedral on the hill of Tallaght na Ligga, meaning the Sandy Hill. This brings us nicely back to St. Patrick, as it was to Tallaght na Ligga that he carried a lost fawn, found when he was marking out his great church, back to the safety of its mother in the famous account from the Book of Armagh. During the history of Armagh, it is no surprise that archaeologists have made a number of interesting discoveries here, dating from its origins to the present day. I'll mention some of the more notable finds. The oldest site found in Armagh was unearthed in Scott Street in 1979. An excavation revealed a Neolithic ring ditch dating to about 2800 BC, making it over 4,500 years old. The site was a circular ditch that enclosed an area 12 metres across, with an entranceway at the southeast. The ditch included flint tools, including an arrowhead and Neolithic pottery of a type used by the people who built passage tombs like Newgrange. The site may have been a place of ritual, but it's difficult to say, as the site was later used as an early Christian cemetery and workshop. Finds from the workshop include fragments of lignite, bronze, glass, and also of amber, which had come from the Baltic. As I mentioned earlier, the discovery of the monastic rath ditch close to the graveyard wall of the cathedral turned up evidence for craft industry, such as metal, glass and enamel working. A find from the ditch included a bronze pin decorated with engravings of birds. The animal bones found in the ditch tell us what the people were eating, and included many cattle bones, cattle being the currency of early medieval Ireland. Digs have also been carried out in the area of Temple na Ferta, St Patrick's first church in Armagh. The name means Church of the Graves, and there is a tradition that Patrick and his sister Lupita were buried there. I'm not sure what Down Patrick would make of that. The remains of the church has not yet been found, but burials, finds and features prove it was occupied in the early Christian period. An ancient graveyard of 10 burials found in 1976 may be associated with an early phase of activity. On Scotch Street, at the back of St Patrick's Fold, which may be built on the site of the church, 2 large rectangular medieval wells were discovered. At the bottom of the wells was found early building rubble, pottery and fragments of Greek porphyry, which may have been brought back to Armagh as souvenirs by medieval pilgrims visiting Eastern Mediterranean centres, or perhaps Rome itself. A hoard of over 90 16th century silver coins was also found at the site. A 16th century ditch found in the area was found to contain a fragment of a human skull. A dig in 1985 at a different part of Temple na Ferta, also on Scotch Street, unearthed an early Christian cemetery of 37 graves. Wood from a coffin in one of the graves was dated to the 6th century. By the 8th century, this too had become an area of craft, with finds including amber, glass, lignite and antler. Also found was the stone foundation of a large medieval building, which was probably part of an Augustinian nunnery. A dig further up Scotch Street revealed early medieval pottery, bronze cloak pins, animal bone, iron objects, another fragment of Greek porphyry, a fragment of human skull, and stone rubble from a possibly early Christian building. Looking now at a different part of Armagh, a dig was carried out in an area between Castle Street and Thomas Street, in between the sites of St Bridget's Church, or Temple of Breed, said to have been founded by St Bridget herself, the Culllee Priory, and the medieval castle which once stood on the north end of Castle Street. Medieval pottery and pits were found here. Excavations at the back of the Armagh Tourist Centre on English Street, on the slope of the Cathedral Hill, revealed the line of a ditch curving around the hillside. Medieval and later pottery was found, and more evidence of craft manufacture. A 15th century Spanish coin was also discovered. The grounds of the 18th century meeting house on Abbey Street was investigated in 1992. This was in the area of the 12th century Augustinian Abbey of Saints Peter and Paul, the stone from which was reputedly used to build the meeting house. Features discovered include a medieval ditch, and finds included early medieval pottery, fragments of human skull, and a Viking silver coin. An earlier dig on Abbey Street had found a medieval or earlier stone foundation, pottery, a glass bead, and 2 coins, one Viking and the other Anglo-Saxon. A dig in 1998 on the site of the new Armagh Theatre, downslope from the cathedral, revealed evidence for activity from early Christian and later times. Features included pits and a large ditch running around the hill containing a lot of animal bone. Finds included an antler comb, pottery and part of a lignite bracelet. Also found was a piece of Neolithic pot and a fragment of a quernstone for grinding corn. A human skull was found in the bottom of the ditch, which may have been a boundary between Trajan Saxon and Trajan Mason. The skull was from a man about 30 years of age who had been decapitated, probably with a sword. From this skull, the man's face has been reconstructed. Interestingly, an annual entry for the year 1127 reports that the men of Athera captured the house of Flan, son of Cinna, in Traian Saxon, in Ardwaha, against Ragnall, son of Macreeve, on the night of the Monday of Shrove Tide, and he was beheaded by them. Was this Flan? Who knows? The foundation of an altar was discovered at the east end of the medieval Franciscan Friary Church, and finds there included stained glass, musket balls, and another fragment of human skull. Investigations at the site of the Bishop's Court in Mullinure found that medieval buildings had been demolished here in the 19th century, when many medieval objects were found in the ruins. In the dig, sherds of pottery were found, confirming medieval occupation, and a hoard of 13th century silver coins was later discovered in Mullinure. Digs were carried out in the 80s on Legger Hill in the west of Armagh, at the site of a church shown on the 1601 map. Here the archaeologists found stone foundations, a small graveyard, and part of the ancient road running from Awanmaha to Armagh. Investigations of later sites included tannery found on College Street, where finds included a 1799 gold guinea and a 19th century brewery owned by the Lyle family, excavated on Lower English Street. From these discoveries we can see that a lot of archaeological finds have been made in Armagh. However, a huge amount is still left to find, and much more work is required to understand the history of the city. Early maps provide important information about the history of sites and give an idea of what might be found when they're dug up. As pointed out earlier, the Enochmacha site lies at the bottom of the north side of the Cathedral Hill and is close to many recorded archaeological sites. The earliest map of the site dates to 1760 and shows a large mound at this location. This is very interesting, as mounds like this are often prehistoric tombs. As we've seen, there is evidence for prehistoric activity in Armagh dating back over 4,500 years. There was also said to have been a stone circle on the southwest side of Cathedral Hill. The mound is not shown on any later maps, so must have been removed in the later part of the 18th century. It does not feature on the Ordnance Survey map of about 1830, which shows the site as open level ground. The area is labelled Shambles, an old term for a butchery and meat market. A valuation map of 1862 shows that the site has now been enclosed by a wall, and there are what look like animal pens on the west side, again suggesting it is part of the shambles and perhaps was used as an area to keep livestock. By 1908, the site has been cleared of pens and returned to an open state. In the 20th century, a fire station was built here, which became an important feature in the life of the shambles. When groundwork started on the Enochmacha site, it became clear that the heavy engineering involved in the construction of the fire station had removed any archaeological features that may have been there. However, some layers of old soil did survive, and it was from this that a number of artefacts were recovered. The finds date from the late 17th to the 20th century and include animal bone, oyster and cockle shells, pottery, tobacco pipe stems, bottle glass, window glass, leather, a wool cardor, a copper disc, and a fragment of an iron blade. These artefacts reflect life in Armagh over the last few centuries. The bones of cattle, sheep, pig and red deer may be butchery waste from the shambles. They also tell us about local farming and what people were eating at the time. The bones of cats and dogs that once roamed these same streets were found too. A horse skull reminds us how important horses were in people's lives, and also recalls that Armagh is named after the horse goddess Maha. The pottery shows us what people are eating off every day. It also tells us about industry, trade, commerce and communications. Some of the earthenware pottery may have been made locally, though many fragments came from vessels imported from England. An interesting example is fragments of a late 17th century sgraffito bowl made in Devon. The very same pottery is found on American colonial sites and shows the network of trade that existed at that time. One of the pieces of Devon pottery is decorated with a horse and jockey motif, which is a nice link to Armagh's history, as the Mall originated as a racecourse. The artefacts bring us a little closer to the people who lived in and walked the streets of Armagh for centuries, and help to bring the past alive. It also gives us a material connection with the past and helps us understand our place in time. The artefacts are on display at Enoch Maha. Thank you and stay safe. Gur Mahag.